I never thought my life would change with a single phone call, but that's exactly what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was in Dallas, 300 miles from home, finalizing a major client contract I'd been working on for months. The hotel conference room felt too cold, as they always do, and I'd been nursing the same lukewarm coffee for 2 hours when my phone buzzed. "I need to step out for a moment," I said to the room of executives, excusing myself when I saw James's name on the screen. My husband rarely called during work hours. Perhaps something was wrong. "Hello?" I answered, stepping into the hallway. "Emily." His voice sounded different, lighter somehow. "I'm divorcing you, and I've already sold our apartment to start my life with my new girlfriend. Enjoy looking for a new place," he laughed, as if he'd just delivered the punchline to a joke. I felt my body go rigid, my mind racing to process his words. Our apartment? Sold? New girlfriend? The questions collided in my mind, but somehow I kept my voice steady. "Sounds good," I replied, my tone neutral, professional, the same voice I used to negotiate contracts. I wasn't giving him the satisfaction of hearing me break. Not now. Not over the phone while standing outside a conference room with the biggest client of my career waiting inside. "That's it? Sounds good?" James sounded disappointed, almost annoyed that I hadn't provided the emotional reaction he'd clearly been anticipating. "I'm in a meeting. We can discuss this when I get home," I said, ending the call before he could respond. I stood there for nearly a minute, staring at the geometric patterns in the hotel carpet, breathing slowly, deliberately. 15 years of marriage, dissolved, in a 20-second phone call. I straightened my blazer, smoothed my hair, and walked back into the conference room. "So sorry for the interruption," I said, smiling at the clients. "Now, where were we on the implementation timeline?" I finished the meeting on autopilot, somehow managing to secure the contract despite feeling like I was operating from outside my own body. The client's CEO shook my hand vigorously, telling me they were impressed with my unwavering focus. If only they knew. On the flight home that evening, I stared out the window at the darkening sky and finally allowed myself to think about what waited for me. 15 years with James, the apartment we'd bought together in our early 30s, the one with the breakfast nook where we'd spent countless Sunday mornings reading the newspaper and planning our future. The future that now, apparently, would never exist. No tears came. Just a hollow feeling in my chest and a strange, almost foreign sense of clarity. By the time the plane touched down, I had a plan. The Uber dropped me at our building, or what was now apparently no longer our building. The doorman, Miguel, looked at me with a strange expression as I approached. "Mrs. Harmon," he said with unusual formality. "Mr. Harmon asked me to give you this when you arrived." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a key to room 718 at the Westbridge Hotel downtown and a note. "Stay here tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. Jay." I looked up at Miguel, who was now studying the floor, clearly uncomfortable. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "Mr. Harmon brought Ms. Rebecca around about 6 months ago," he answered, still not meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harmon. I wanted to say something, but—" "It's not your responsibility, Miguel," I assured him, though the revelation that my husband's affair had been going on for half a year, right under the noses of our building staff, sent a fresh wave of humiliation through me. "I assume I can still go up to collect my things?" "Mr. Harmon said you can come by tomorrow at 10 a.m. to pack. He and Ms. Rebecca are there now." I nodded, thanked him, and turned away. I wouldn't give James, or Rebecca, whoever she was, the satisfaction of seeing me displaced and disoriented. The Westbridge it would be, but not room 718. I wouldn't sleep where my husband directed. Me too, like some obedient pet being kennelled during an inconvenient transition. I checked into a different hotel entirely and sat on the edge of the bed, finally alone with my thoughts. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. "Diana, it's me. I need your help." Diana had been my best friend since college and was now one of the top divorce attorneys in the city. I'd never imagined I'd be calling her professionally. Emily? What's wrong? Her voice was instantly alert despite the late hour. James is divorcing me. He's already sold our apartment, apparently, and he has a girlfriend. There was a long pause. That son of a bitch, she finally said. And he's already sold your apartment? Without your signature? That's what he claims. Emily, that's not possible. Not legally. Not without your consent. Diana's voice had shifted fully into lawyer mode. What exactly did he say? I recounted the brief conversation. Okay, first thing tomorrow morning, come to my office. Don't contact him. Don't go to the apartment when he tells you to. Let me do some checking first. After hanging up, I lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since James's call, I felt something breaking through the shock, anger, yes, but also something else. A strange, unexpected sense of relief? The thought startled me. Was some part of me relieved that my marriage was over? I thought about the last few years with James, how we'd grown increasingly distant, how his ambition at the investment firm had gradually transformed him from the thoughtful, kind man I'd married into someone I sometimes barely recognized. Status-obsessed, frequently condescending, especially about my career and corporate training, which he'd started referring to as my little consulting business, despite the fact that I earned nearly as much as he did. I'd been so busy trying to make everything work, to maintain the life we'd built, that I hadn't fully acknowledged how unhappy I'd become. How much energy I expended walking on eggshells around his ego. How lonely I often felt, even when we were in the same room. Sleep didn't come easily that night, but when it did, it was deeper than I'd slept in years. Diana's office was on the 47th floor of a sleek downtown tower. Through her floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out below, people moving like ants along the sidewalks. I wondered if James was down there somewhere, celebrating his newfound freedom. I've done some checking, Diana said, sliding a folder across her desk to me. James doesn't have the legal authority to sell your apartment without your signature. The property is in both your names. Relief washed over me. So he was bluffing? Not exactly. Diana's expression was grim. He hasn't sold it yet, but he's listed it. And there's more. She opened the folder. James has been moving money around, substantial amounts. I had my financial investigator do some preliminary digging. She showed me bank statements, investment, accounts, transfers, most with unfamiliar account numbers. He's been siphoning funds from your joint accounts into private ones for at least a year, Diana explained. And there's evidence he's been preparing for this divorce for quite some time. My mind flashed back to the odd comments he'd made over the past year. Suggestions that I might want to simplify and put more of my earnings into our future. His insistence that I didn't need to worry about our finances because he had everything under control. All the times he'd made me feel neurotic for wanting more transparency. What do we do? I asked, a strange calm settling over me. We get ahead of him, Diana said with a determined gleam in her eye. Emily, I need to ask you something important. Do you want to try to save this marriage? The question hung in the air. Did I? The image of James laughing as he delivered news that he knew would devastate me flashed through my mind. The 6 months of bringing another woman into our home while I was traveling for work. The calculated financial deception. No, I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. I don't. Diana nodded. Then we move fast. I'm filing emergency motions today to freeze the joint assets before he can transfer anything else. We'll also file an injunction to prevent the sale of the apartment. Can he fight it? He can try. But I'm very good at my job, Diana said with a confident smile that reminded me why she had the reputation she did. Now I need you to do something that might be difficult. What's that? Act like you don't know any of this. Meet him when he suggested at 10 a.m. Listen to whatever he has to say. Don't confront him. Don't let on that you've spoken to me. Just gather information. You want me to pretend everything is normal? Not normal. He's expecting you to be upset, confused. Be those things. Let him think he has the upper hand. I nodded, slowly, understanding the strategy. I can do that. Standing outside our apartment door at precisely 10 a.m., I took a deep breath and knocked instead of using my key. James opened the door, looking slightly surprised to see me. "You're punctual," he said, as if we were meeting for a business appointment. "Always have been," I replied, stepping past him into what had been our home for over a decade. The apartment looked different. Small changes, a throw pillow I didn't recognize, a new lamp in the corner, a woman's jacket draped over one of the dining chairs. Territory already marked. "Where would you like me to start packing?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. James leaned against the wall, studying me. He was dressed casually in jeans and a gray sweater I'd given him 2 Christmases ago. He looked rested, energized, happy. "You're taking this well," he said, sounding almost disappointed again. "I thought you'd be more upset." I shrugged. "What good would that do?" "Emily, come on. We've been together 15 years. You must have something to say." What could I say? That I was devastated, humiliated, blindsided? All true, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "I'd like to know about the apartment," I said instead. "You said you sold it?" "I have a buyer lined up," he corrected. "The paperwork is being processed." Lie number 1, just as Diana had suspected. I see. "And when were you planning to get my signature?" A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed his face. "That's what I wanted to discuss with you today, actually. I've drawn up an agreement. It's very fair. I'd like to see it." He went to his office and returned with a document, which he handed to me with the confident air of someone used to having his terms accepted without question. I skimmed it, recognizing the predatory nature of what he was proposing. A buyout of my interest in the apartment for roughly 30% of its actual value. A generous one-time settlement that represented a fraction of what I was legally entitled to after 15 years of marriage. "This seems low," I said mildly, watching his face. "It's more than fair, Emily," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You know I was the primary contributor to our assets." Another lie. We'd built our financial life together, almost equally. "Would you mind if I took this to look over?" "Actually, I was hoping we could settle this today," he said, a hint of impatience creeping into his voice. "The buyers are eager to close." I folded the document and put it in my bag. "I'll need some time to review it. Where are my clothes? I should start packing what I'll need immediately." James looked frustrated, but gestured toward the bedroom. "I've put some boxes in there for you." I walked into what had been our bedroom and stopped short. The closet doors were open, and I could see that more than half of my clothes were already gone. "Where are the rest of my things?" I asked, turning to James, who had followed me. "I donated some of the older items," he said casually. "Things you haven't worn in a while. I figured it would save you some time." The calculated cruelty of it, disposing of my possessions without my knowledge, hit me like a physical blow. But I maintained my composure. "I see," I said, beginning to methodically select items from what remained and place them in the boxes. "And my jewelry?" "In the safe, where it always is." I went to the safe hidden in the closet wall and entered the code. Empty. "James," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "where is my jewelry?" He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "I moved it to a safety deposit box, for security, with all the people who'll be coming through for viewings." Another lie. I knew then that Diana had been right about everything. "Including my grandmother's sapphire necklace?" I asked, referring to the family heirloom that had been passed down to me, worth considerable money, but far more in sentimental value. "Everything is safe," he assured me, not quite meeting my eyes. I continued packing in silence, taking only what I absolutely needed: clothes, a few books, my laptop and work materials, personal documents I found in my desk drawer that he hadn't yet removed. As I worked, I noticed a framed photo on the nightstand, one that hadn't been there before. James with a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s, at least 15 years younger than both of us. She was beautiful in an obvious way, blonde and slim, beaming up at him adoringly. Rebecca, I presumed. The photo had been placed deliberately, I was sure, another calculated blow. "When will she be moving in?" I asked, nodding toward the photo. "She already has," James replied, watching for my reaction. "Partially, anyway." I nodded, continuing to pack. "How did you meet?" "She's an associate at the firm," he said, seeming more relaxed now that I was asking questions rather than making accusations. "She's incredibly bright, MBA from Wharton." "Impressive," I said, closing a box and sealing it with tape. "And how long has this been going on?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not," I conceded, though I noted he didn't deny Miguel's timeline of 6 months. I worked efficiently, finishing faster than James seemed to have anticipated. Within 2 hours, I had packed everything I intended to take immediately. "I'll arrange to have these delivered to my hotel," I said, gesturing to the boxes. "You can take the key to the Westbridge," James offered, sounding almost conciliatory. "The room is paid up for a week. Gives you time to find a place." "That's thoughtful, but I've made other arrangements." I shouldered my handbag and headed for the door. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours about the settlement proposal." "Lawyer?" James looked genuinely surprised. "Emily, that's not necessary. We can handle this amicably." I turned to look at him one last time before leaving. "Goodbye, James. I'll be in touch." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, financial disclosures, and apartment hunting. Diana had been true to her word. The emergency motions had been filed and granted, freezing the joint assets before James could transfer anything else. The injunction against selling the apartment had been successful as well, much to the frustration of James and his attorney. I found a temporary furnished apartment and threw myself into my work, grateful for the distraction. The client in Dallas had led to 2 more major contracts, and my business was thriving despite the personal turmoil. It was nearly 3 weeks after James's phone call when Diana called me, excitement evident in her voice. "Emily, we've hit the sea." "Jackpot," she said without preamble. "The financial investigator found offshore accounts, multiple ones. James has been hiding substantial assets." "How substantial?" I asked, sitting down at my kitchen table. "Several million. And that's not all. There's evidence he's been committing some creative accounting at his firm, the type that could interest the SEC. I closed my eyes, absorbing this new information. What does this mean for the divorce? It means we have significant leverage. His attorney reached out this morning, suddenly very interested in discussing a settlement. I thought about James, about the careful image he'd constructed over the years, the respected investment manager, the shrewd financial mind, the devoted husband. All facades, it turned out. "What are you thinking?" Diana asked after my lengthy silence. "I'm thinking I don't want to destroy him," I said slowly, surprising myself. "As much as he might deserve it." "Emily." "Hear me out, Diana. I want what's fair. I want what I'm entitled to legally. But I don't want a prolonged public battle that would potentially involve his firm or the authorities. That doesn't help me move forward." There was a pause on the line. "Are you sure about this? Because we have him cornered." "I'm sure." "Draft. A settlement that gives me my fair share of everything, including those hidden assets. I want the apartment too. He can keep his girlfriend, but not the home we built together. And I want my grandmother's necklace back, non-negotiable." "But I don't want to drag this out any longer than necessary," Diana sighed. "It's your call. I'll draft the terms. But don't be surprised if he doesn't take it. Men like James don't surrender easily." "He will when he realizes the alternative," I said with newfound confidence. The meditation studio was James's idea, neutral ground for our first face-to-face meeting since I'd left the apartment. I arrived early and selected a seat that would allow me to see him enter. The studio was empty, except for me, the sound of gentle ambient music filtering through hidden speakers. James arrived precisely on time, looking noticeably less polished than when I'd last seen him. There were shadows under his eyes, and his normally immaculate hair looked as though he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Thank you for meeting me," he said formally, taking the seat across from me. "Diana said you wanted to talk." "Directly, without the attorneys present," I replied. I agreed as a courtesy, but anything we discuss here will need to be formalized through proper channels. James nodded, his expression serious. "I received your settlement proposal. And? It's significant." "It's fair," I corrected. "It represents my rightful share of our marital assets, all of them." His eyes narrowed slightly at the emphasis. "Emily, be reasonable. Some of those accounts were deliberately hidden." "From me and the IRS," I finished for him. "Yes, I'm aware." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "How did you find them?" "Does it matter? What matters is that I did, and so could others, if this becomes contentious." The implication hung in the air between us. James was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He understood the threat. "What exactly do you want?" he asked after a long moment. "Exactly what's outlined in the proposal. My fair share of our assets, the apartment, my grandmother's jewelry returned immediately, and a clean break." "And Rebecca?" I smiled thinly. "She's all yours, though you might want to make sure she loves you for yourself, and not for the lifestyle you promised her. A lifestyle that's about to become significantly less lavish." James flinched, then seemed to deflate slightly. "You know, I convinced myself you'd be devastated. That you needed me more than I needed you." "That was your mistake," I said quietly. "I built a life with you, James, not because I needed to, but because I chose to. There's a difference." He nodded slowly, looking suddenly older than his 45 years. "I'll sign the settlement." "All of it? No counteroffers or negotiations?" "All of it," he confirmed. "I want this over with as much as you do." I studied his face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only resignation and perhaps a hint of relief. "I'll have Diana draw up the final paperwork," I said, rising from my seat. "And James? I expect my grandmother's necklace to be delivered to her office by the end of business today." He nodded again, not meeting my eyes. As I walked to the door, he called after me. "For what?" "It's worth I am sorry. Not for ending the marriage, we both know it wasn't working, but for how I did it." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "You're right. It wasn't working, but we could have ended it with dignity and respect. That was your choice to make." "And what about you?" he asked, a hint of the old James returning. "What will you do now?" I turned back to look at him one last time. "I'm going to live my life, James, on my terms, without apology or justification to anyone." And with that, I walked out, not just from the meditation studio, but from the shadow his presence had cast over my life for far too long. 6 months later, I stood in what was now indisputably my apartment, looking out over the city lights. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed once James had agreed to the settlement terms. My grandmother's sapphire necklace was safely back in my possession, and I'd been wearing it frequently, a reminder of both my family legacy and my own resilience. The apartment looked different now. I'd redecorated, removing the heavy masculine furniture James had preferred and creating a space that reflected my own aesthetic. Lighter colors, more artwork, plants in every room. A home that felt like mine. My phone chimed with a text message from Diana. "Drinks? Celebrating Henderson contract?" I smiled. The Henderson contract was my biggest yet, a nationwide training program that would double my company's revenue. I'd hired 3 new employees in the past month just to keep up with demand. "Absolutely," I texted back. "The usual place at 8? As I set my phone down, I caught my reflection in the window, a woman I was still getting to know. Stronger than she'd realized, more capable than she'd been given credit for, even by herself. Still a work in progress, but unquestionably her own creation. The phone call that had turned my life upside down had ultimately set me free, though not in the way James had intended. He'd meant to devastate me, to leave me scrambling and vulnerable. Instead, he'd inadvertently forced me to rediscover myself, not as someone's wife, but as simply myself, Emily, complete and sufficient on my own terms. I picked up my keys and headed for the door. Diana would be waiting, and after her, who knew? The future stretched before me, unwritten. For the first time in years, the blank page didn't frighten me. It invited me to write my own story, one choice at a time. As the door closed behind me, I felt a curious lightness in my step. The worst had happened, and yet here I was, still standing, still breathing, still moving forward,